Hope this works. I've been trying out this new video app, so we'll see. Hopefully it will. We are in Con Law, week 1. I am Mr. Godwin. Hopefully you've already been into your folders some and see what I have in there for you. The one folder is going to be there throughout the semester, and it's for general review, and it's the very first folder, the welcome folder. It's got some links in there to like Supreme Court, other things like that, and hopefully you'll see those. We're going to add a few things in there throughout the semester, so just keep a check on it. For right now, we're going to go over some of what should already be in there, and hopefully you'll see what I'm talking about. I'm using 2 different books depending on where you picked them up at and how many books we had. The one is Jacqueline R. Canovitz's 13th edition to constitutional law. It's brown, looks like this. You may also have a green one. That's the 12th edition. It should have the same information there, so you may have to dig around some. If you can't find something that I'm talking about, either during a lecture or in my notes or assignments, just shoot me an email or shoot me a text and let me know what it is you're looking for, and I'll make sure you get a copy of it. What I want to talk about a little bit today is I'm going to have to break down, we put videos on YouTube and then adding them to the class. So there's only like 15 minutes worth of time I have to be able to do these lectures. So you'll see during the week I'll add various short lectures for you to review. Right now I want to talk about the Constitution and what it actually is. And we'll do some history on the Constitution before we actually get into con law. And the reason we need to do that is because the constitutional law that we go by, or case law that you'll hear, it's based on the original Constitution. Actually, there's 2 trains of thought here. There's people that are purists like I am who believe that when you're looking at the constitutionality of a ruling or a law, you need to look at the Constitution and how it was written by the Founding Fathers, meaning you need to use that original document, the way it was written, and the intent. And to be able to do that, you need to know about the Founding Fathers. You need to know what the politics were at the time, what they were thinking, to be able to make the determination of what they actually intended at the time. So this first week you'll see there's a lot of history in there. There's stuff about the Founding Fathers, about the authors of the Constitution, because I really want you to understand them, because without understanding the history, it's going to be hard for you to get a good interpretation of the Constitution. And we'll talk about the Constitution in its parts. It's one singular document, but there's various parts to that singular document, and we use the different parts differently according to either law enforcement or the legal profession, and we're going to break those down. First of all, you'll see, and I think in your book, if you go to 1.6, the title of it is Structure and Content of the Constitution. That should be the same in both books as far as title goes. But what I want you to look at specifically are the first 7 articles of the Constitution. And what the articles do is they set up the framework or the guidelines for how we're going to establish federal and state governance. So those first 7 articles, the first things written in the Constitution, what they are there for is to tell us this is who we are, and this is how we operate, and it establishes the various branches of the federal government and gives powers to the states accordingly. And if you'll notice, the first 3 articles are the ones that set up the federal government. Firstly, they set up the legislation, and when you look at what the legislative branch is, it consists of the House of Representatives and the Senate, which are the Congress. And in the legislative branch, with the House of Representatives, you have the junior officers. And the House of Representatives is decided, you get representatives according to your population. So bigger states get more representatives, and smaller states get fewer. And what it does is, it's the House that writes the bills, and determines what processes we're going to send into law. Now, with your House of Representatives, it is like it says in original intent, meaning it was for the states or the governors of those states to send people that represent the view of the governor or the views of that state in accordance to what laws are written or what laws are passed. So they're actually that. They are the voice of the voters and the voice of the states. Now, you don't really see that much in federal government anymore. It's pretty much you elect a guy and he does what he wants to do, and we feel like we don't have any power. Well, your power comes into re-electing them. You don't have to re-elect them, and you can vote somebody new in, and that will change the view. You vote for whose views you agree with, and that hopefully will depict how they vote when they get into the House of Representatives. But the House of Representatives can be someone brand new to politics. It was designed for lower statesmen, is what it's called, meaning somebody has less experience in politics and governance and those kind of things. They're just there to represent the views of their constituents, which are the voters or the governor. The Senate, for senators, the way it works is the Senate, each state gets 2 senatorial representatives, so each state has 2 senators, and the Senate was set up to be elder statesmen, meaning politicians with more experience who understand the law more, who understands government structure a little bit better, and they're there to give oversight of the House of Representatives. So when a bill goes through, and a bill eventually becomes law, if it's passed, a bill comes through the House of Representatives. If it's approved through the House, it has to go to Senate to be approved by them. If the Senate, which are supposedly the elder statesmen, the overwatch dogs of the House of Representatives, those guys who have more understanding, more background, they're going to review those bills. If they sign off on them and say, yes, we agree with the way this is written, we agree with the content, we believe it's constitutional, and not only is it constitutional, we agree with what it's doing, and they sign off on it, meaning the House has passed it, it's gone to the Senate signs off on it, then it goes to the executive branch, which brings us to Article number 2. Article number 2 sets up the executive branch, and what the executive branch is, the President of the United States. So new laws come through House, Senate, which is Congress, the legislative branch. It goes to the executive branch for approval. The President will sign off on it. Article 2 also establishes special powers of the executive branch, and it establishes that office in a whole, the President and his powers. Now, initially there was some thought that the United States would have a king, and of course, with George Washington, he turned it down and said, I will not be a king. I don't want to be a monocrat. I don't want us to have that kind of society. It's really against the whole reason why our country was set up. That's why in Congress they made sure they set the executive branch and the guidelines to it to put in legal format how we're going to operate. And that's why you have these articles. It's the legal, it's the contract that says this is how we're going to operate. So Article 2 sets up the executive branch, gives powers to the President, and what he can do. And then Article 3, and of course these are the 3 primary articles that deal with us in law enforcement or us in the legal system. Article 3 sets up the judiciary branch. That's our 3 primary branches of government: legislative, executive, and judiciary. The judiciary branch is the Supreme Court. Now hopefully all of y'all understand what the powers of the Supreme Court are. They don't decide guilt or innocence. It's not that type of court. When a case goes before the Supreme Court, it goes there for judicial review, meaning they're reviewing the rulings and the process that was taking place during the process of that case, meaning they're reviewing it primarily for constitutionality. So when they get a case and they say, we're going to send this back to the lower courts with a decision, what they're saying is we don't feel like this case was handled constitutionally, so we're sending it back to the lower courts for them to review what was done and to change the decisions that were there. The Supreme Court doesn't do that. They just rule that it was unconstitutional and they send it back. And they don't say it was unconstitutional, You have to read the decision, but what they do when they send that decision back is it rules what they found was wrong, and it gives the lower courts instructions on how to fix that. Now, every now and then they'll pick up a case and they'll uphold it, meaning if there's been a lot of debate about a certain issue and they want to establish constitutionality and say, yes, this process is constitutional, we don't think it needs to be reviewed anymore, we're agreeing with how this is being done, they'll get a case and they'll agree with what the lower courts did, and that's to establish case law and say, okay, quit reviewing this, quit sending these up for review. We think that's what's done in this process is constitutional and the way it's been done. So they'll uphold some cases. If the Supreme Court refuses to review a case or to bring a case on, it means that they've looked at it and they don't think there's any issues with it, or if there are some issues, it's not something that's constitutional that they need to handle at the Supreme Court. So when they pick up something, it doesn't mean that there's nothing wrong with that case, or they don't pick up a case. It doesn't mean there's nothing wrong with it. It just means that they've reviewed it and they don't believe that it's in the purview of the Supreme Court to make a decision on it. So what I want you guys to do in this first week is to review the articles, and to fully understand Article 1, 2, and 3, but to be able to speak to those first 7 articles, or the 7 articles, and know what they're for, because we'll cover some of that on the test. And then in a different video, we're going to talk about the Bill of Rights, and in another video, we're going to go into amendments and what amendments I want you to be familiar with. But for now, take a look at the first 7 articles. I want you to specifically know Article 1, 2, and 3, know what they establish, and know why we have the articles in the Constitution. Okay? If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email, shoot me a text if you want to, and I'll be glad to work with you and make sure you understand what's going on. Thanks, and have a great week.